ओम त्यागेश्वरम रामकृष्णम शारदां मातृरूपिणीं विवेकानंदमाचार्यं नत्वा वक्ष्यामि शुद्धये। योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचा मलं शरीरस्य च भैषजेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। In our last class, we discussed that sutra, vrittyaha panchatayah, klishta klishtaha. So the vrittis of the mind, the mental modifications, it says are of 5 types. And again, another way of dividing these mental modifications, they are either klishta vrittis or aklishta vrittis. So 2 ways of looking at these vrittis. These vrittis are to be controlled. That control of vrittis is what is called yoga. So since yoga deals with this control of vrittis, Patanjali is telling us how many types of vrittis are there, and so that we get a clearer idea of what we are up to. These klishta vrittis we discussed, these deal with vrittis which lead us to suffering, lead us to pain. Those are called klishta vrittis. And vrittis which free us or lead us towards freedom from pain, these are called aklishta vrittis. And we saw an example of how knowledge is kind of neutral. We see something, it's neutral, but then these drives get attached to that knowledge. And then that vritti gets, so to say, either vitiated or ennobled. We see something and then we fall for it, we work, and all that. So those klishta vrittis and aklishta vrittis. In that commentary, the commentator Vyasa, he makes a very important point, saying that sajatiyakaha samskaraha vrittibhi kriyante. That is the problem. Like when we react in a certain way, we pursue certain emotions, certain reactions, work on them. That whole thing will create samskaras. That's what he is telling. When you see something, you feel compassion, you try to work and remove that suffering which caused compassion. Then this whole process, it creates samskaras. It strengthens the samskaras of compassion within us. Sajatiyakaha samskaraha vrittibhi kriyante. So these vrittis, the way we react, the way we act, these form samskaras. Samskaras are, we can call, impressions. Impressions in the mind. So vritti just doesn't change the mind. Vritti is just not a modification. It has this potential or the after effect of leaving a samskara, creating a habit in the way we understand it, creating a habit within us. And that is a far-reaching effect of these vrittis, and pursuing various reactions that we get indiscriminately. Because we are creating samskaras, and our character is nothing but the whole bundle of, or sum total of samskaras. And that's why every moment we are creating our future. Whatever vrittis we are encouraging, we are pursuing, whatever emotions, reactions we are pursuing, we are making ourselves in that model, in that fashion. Because these vrittis are going to leave samskaras, subliminal impressions. They are going to form our character. And the next sentence, Vyasa says, samskaraischa vrittaya. These samskaras in future will pop up vrittis. So what I think or do today will go and form a samskara. And tomorrow a similar situation comes, I will have the same kind of reaction, and the source is that samskara. And that's how we find different people react in different ways to the same situation. Situation is same. They have understood the situation in the same way, but they react differently. The difference is attributed to the different samskaras. And again, the samskaras have been created by us only. These have not come from nowhere. We have molded ourselves in the fashion that we are today. So these vrittis form samskaras. Samskaras again throw up vrittis. Evam samskara vritti chakram anisham avartate. This cycle of samskaras and vrittis and vrittis and samskaras, this goes on and on and on. And that is why these samskaras are very powerful. Good samskaras protect us. And these klishta samskaras, they drag us down. And sometimes these samskaras are very powerful, good or bad, either of them. So there is that story of a spiritual sadhaka who fell in bad company one day by mistake or whatever. He fell in bad company, and then when it was evening, someone said, "Oh, it is getting dark, light the lamps." The moment he heard this, all the good samskaras came up, because every evening when it is dark and when the lights are lit, he has the habit of going and praying. So the moment he heard these words, that samskara came up. And suddenly he realized, where is he and what is he doing? And then he came away from that place. So the samskaras, good samskaras protect us. And the klishta samskaras, they drag us down. People behave in the ways that are undesirable. But they seem helpless. Sometimes they understand, but they are helpless. Sometimes they don't, many times people do not understand at all. They say, this is how I am. But this is how I am. We need not be like that always. We have the power to change ourselves, because we have created these samskaras by allowing or pursuing certain reactions. And we have the power to counter them. But sometimes these samskaras are very strong, and people may understand that it is not right to react in a certain way, but still they react because the samskaras are very strong. And later Patanjali tells how to counter this, how we can counter these klishta samskaras and all that. He will tell our the vrittis, klishta vrittis, how we can counter them. The samskaras have to be countered by another powerful samskaras only. There is the only way samskaras can be countered. There is no other way. So we have to create counter samskaras. Only those samskaras will check, so to say, the undesirable samskaras. So that we will come to it later, where Patanjali himself will tell. So this was the two distinctions or two divisions he made of the vrittis, klishta and aklishta. The other first part of the sutra said vritteha panchataya. There are 5 types. Another way of dividing these vrittis is these are of 5 types. So the next sutra tells us what these 5 types of vrittis are, which is pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smrtayaha. These are the 5 types of vrittis. Pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, and smriti. Pramana is, all these are vrittis. So a vritti, pramana vritti is that which gives us right knowledge. Pramana vritti is that which gives us right knowledge. That is pramana vritti. As opposed to that, viparya is which gives us wrong knowledge, false knowledge. That is viparya. That is also a mental modification. That is also a vritti, which gives us false knowledge. Then there is vikalpa vritti. Vikalpa vritti is that knowledge actually has no basis in the real world at all. The examples given is someone says something, we just imagine, jump to certain conclusions which have no corroborative reality in the world. So that is vikalpa vritti. And then there is nidra and smriti. Nidra is sleep and smriti is memory. So our whole life is revolving or rotating within these 5 types of vrittis. pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra and smriti. He is going to elaborate on each of these. So the next sutra tells which are the pramanas. But Patanjali does not define or explain what pramana is, what exactly pramana is. That is left to the commentators. Maybe because this word pramana and the concept of pramana is very well known in the philosophical circles. And that is why Patanjali has not defined what pramana is. When we say pramana vritti or mental modifications of pramana, which gives us right knowledge. That's how we define it. But then again, what is right knowledge? In Sanskrit, it's called prama. So how do you define prama or right knowledge? For that also, there are characteristics. Every piece of information cannot be a prama. So they say it has to be in the present. It has to be a fresh knowledge. To distinguish it from smriti, with memory, to distinguish it from smriti, they say prama has to be fresh knowledge, new knowledge in the present. That is one. And secondly, it has to be uncontradicted. Knowledge which is not contradicted, it's called prama. It's called right knowledge. That example, a famous example of rope and snake, or snake and rope, whatever. So we see a snake and we are scared, and then someone comes with a light, and then we see it is not a snake, it is a rope. So our knowledge that it is a snake is contradicted by the knowledge that it is rope. So obviously the knowledge that this is a snake was not prama. It was viparya. It was not prama. It was not right knowledge. But the knowledge that this is a rope, so I go near it, we touch it, we do whatever we want with it, that knowledge is not contradicted. And hence it is prama. It is right knowledge. So new, fresh knowledge which is not contradicted, it's called prama. That is right knowledge, valid knowledge. And pramayaha karanam is pramanam. Pramayaha karanam pramanam. The means of prama is pramana. The instrument of valid knowledge is called pramana. That's how pramana is defined. So whenever we get valid knowledge, there is a vritti, chitta vritti behind it. There is a modification of mind stuff behind that knowledge. That is called pramana vritti. That is one of the 5 vrittis. So every mental modification that gives us right knowledge, valid knowledge, is called pramana vritti. So that is how, and then of course Patanjali will explain other, what is viparya, what is vikalpa, we'll see that. But in between he enlists 3 pramanas. Now this subject of pramanas is very well discussed in our philosophical literature. There is hair-splitting logic about it. How many kinds of pramanas are there, how many means of knowledge we have, and all that. So various philosophical schools accept different set of pramanas, different set of instruments of knowledge, different set of means of knowledge. On one end of the spectrum, we have Charvakas or rank materialists who accept that only pratyaksha or direct perception is the only pramana, is the only means of valid knowledge. They don't accept even inference. They say what we see with our senses, we see, we hear or touch or smell, whatever, that alone is valid. That is the only means of valid knowledge, our sensory perception. They don't accept any other means of valid knowledge. They are on one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum are Vedantins who accept 6 means of valid knowledge. They are the Vedantins. According to them, all the valid knowledge we have got it in either of the 6 ways. There are 6 ways through which we get valid knowledge. So they have 6 pramanas. Patanjali takes kind of a middle path, and he says there are three pramanas, three means of valid knowledge: Pratyaksha, Anumana, and Shabda. These are the three means of valid knowledge that Patanjali accepts. Pratyaksha, of course, is through our sensory perception. We see things through our eyes, we hear, and all that. Now, when we do that, we think that we are the eyes. We think that eye is the means of knowledge, visual perception. Eye is the means. Or when we hear something, we feel that ear is the means of knowledge. But our philosophies do not accept. Our philosophers do not accept. They say that these are accessory means, sahakari. They are accessories. But actual means of knowledge is the mind. The mind comes in contact with the sense objects through these sense organs. So these sense organs have only this work of bringing the mind in contact with the sense objects. And after that, it is the mind which takes, so to say, the form of the sense objects and reveals it. And that vritti, that modification of the mind, it's called Pratyaksha Pramana Vritti. That will be the Pramana Vritti of Pratyaksha. So that is one means of knowledge called Pratyaksha. The other means of knowledge that Patanjali accepts is Anumana, which is inference. We use inference in our day-to-day life. In fact, what we call so-called intelligent people are those who can infer correctly. So inference is a means of knowledge we use in our day-to-day life. The stock example is the hill is on fire because we see smoke in it. Parvato Vandiman Dhumat. Because we see smoke in it, hill is on fire. Now, the moment we see smoke, we know there is fire. So there is a valid knowledge about fire in our mind, seeing the smoke. The fire is not an object of our direct perception. We are not seeing fire through our eyes. But it's a valid knowledge we get that there is fire there because there is smoke. Now this is different from direct perception because, as I said, we are not seeing the fire with our eyes. But we are seeing with our eyes only smoke. So that is pointing us to the fire. And the knowledge of that fire is very valid. We work on it. If we see smoke, we will call the fire brigade or we will make arrangement to douse that fire. We don't wait to go and see the fire with our own eyes. So we work on that knowledge. And it's a valid knowledge. It is not got directly through the senses. So that knowledge is called inferential knowledge. And now you see, this happens in a fraction of a second. We see something and we arrive at the knowledge. We come to home, we see a car outside, and immediately we say, oh, such and such a person has come. We get that knowledge. It's given kind of thing in a flash. But actually so many processes have happened between that and that those logicians, they have spent a lot of time in deciphering how one pratyaksha pramana we are seeing leads to an inferential knowledge. There are a lot of processes in that. We won't get into those. That's hair-splitting logic, as I said. But there is a process. And the final vritti, which gives us the knowledge of fire, is called Anumana Pramana Vritti. That is Pramana Vritti. That is vritti which has given us prama, which has given us right knowledge about fire, about the object inferred. And it is right knowledge, but it is not direct perception. So it is Anumana, and that vritti is Anumana Pramana Vritti. So that is another vritti of the mind, which has given us valid knowledge, and that vritti is Anumana Pramana Vritti. And the third he talks is Aptavakya, or Shabda Pramana. That is the testimony of the trustworthy. Now, that also we use in our day-to-day life. We trust the words of the trustworthy persons. We believe doctors, lawyers, our teachers who teach us mathematics, physics. We believe them, we trust them. And whatever they say becomes knowledge for us. Earth is round. Our teacher tells us. We have not gone outside and seen whether, outside the earth and seen whether earth is round. But we trust that person, and that's knowledge. It's a valid knowledge. So that vritti, which generates valid knowledge based on the words of a trustworthy person, that is called Shabda Pramana Vritti. That has given us valid knowledge. It is not a direct perception. It is not Anumana. It is based on trust. And so it is called Shabda Pramana Vritti. That's also again a vritti. We hear, somebody tells us, a trustworthy person tells us, that gives us a valid knowledge. Or we read from a very, very authentic source that gives us a valid knowledge. That valid knowledge is Prama. And there is a vritti behind it, which has created that, which has generated, so to say, that valid knowledge. That vritti is Shabda Pramana Vritti. So these are the three types of pramanas that Patanjali talks of. Only about the Shabda Pramana, we have to elaborate a bit because it is very essential and important when it comes to spiritual life. Because in spiritual life, our whole spiritual life depends on this Shabda Pramana, on the Aptavakya, on the words of the Aptas, trustworthy persons. Our whole spiritual life, our endeavors, everything depends on that. So, who is an Apta? Who is a trustworthy person? And what kind of teaching should we accept? About that also there are few conditions. For a person to be Apta in a spiritual sense of the term, when it comes to spiritual knowledge, that person has to be absolutely pure and unselfish. That is the first condition. When it comes to worldly knowledge, this condition does not apply. No one bothers the character of anybody who is giving us some worldly knowledge. So long as she is good in his or her subject, we are fine with it. But when it comes to spiritual knowledge, that person has to be absolutely pure and unselfish. Then only that person can be called an Apta, and we can trust that person's words and work on them. Secondly, it has to be supersensuous in spiritual matters. So only because matters of this world, these Aptas don't have any role to play, so to say. Their words need not be taken as absolutely true if they are talking about matters of this world. So these have to be supersensuous. And third and most important criteria is whatever they say, it has to be verifiable, whatever. We should be able to verify it in our own lives. If a person says that this is the truth, but you can't realize it, only I can realize it, then he or she is no more an Apta. For a person to be Apta, he or she has to say that this is the truth, I have realized it, you can also realize it, provided you put the right efforts. So it has to be verifiable. The truths taught by an Apta have to be verifiable. Then only that person will be called an Apta. So a trustworthy person in spiritual life has to be absolutely pure. The teaching should pertain to objects which are beyond the range of the senses, and that person should say that this is something that can be verified by one and all, provided they put in the right efforts. Then only that person becomes an Apta, and that person's words become Aptavakya. And of course, there is fourth condition, which is that that person must have realized the truth himself or herself. So, by reading books, if someone says something, then it doesn't become Aptavakya. By getting book knowledge, one doesn't become an Apta. For a person to be an Apta, to be trustworthy, he or she must have had the first-hand experience of the truth. So these are the 3-4 criteria for a person to be an Apta. And for us to accept his or her words as true. So these are the three pramanas which Patanjali accepts: Pratyaksha, Anumana and Shabda. And all these, there are three means through which we get valid knowledge. But every piece of knowledge has a pramana vritti, a modification in the mind. And that is one of the 5 types of vrittis which our mind keeps getting into, as told by Patanjali. Right. Next Sunday, we won't have class. Our Revered Swami Tyaganandaji Maharaj will be speaking, so we won't have this class next Sunday. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.